Good afternoon on this Friday, October 18th. I'm Yumna Naufal and these are today's headlines. Lebanese Forces leader Samir Raja says Lebanon is suffering from a crisis in its political system over the rejection of a certain party of the Ta'if Accord. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon calls Lebanese leaders to fortify the national institutions and safeguard the country from the repercussions of the Syrian turmoil. And the ambassador of the European Union holds a meeting with President Michel Sleiman, during which they both pledge additional support to Lebanon with coping with the burden of refugees. Lebanese leader Samir Raja says that Lebanon has been suffering from a crisis in its political system over the rejection of a certain party of the Ta'if Accord. In an interview with Al Jamhuriya newspaper published on Friday, Raja said, quote, "We are suffering from a system crisis and all other issues are aimed at covering it up." He added that the crisis could be resolved if Lebanese officials assumed their full responsibilities in guaranteeing the safety of the system. It would be wise, he said, for everyone to accept the Ta'if Accord and hold on to it, although he also admitted that none of Lebanon's political parties give their consent. Asked about efforts by some Christian parties to amend the Ta'if Accord, Raja said the demands of the parties are very contradictory. Hezbollah and its backers are seeking through their demographic size to change the balance created by the Ta'if. Would they accept to keep their share as it is today, he wondered? The ambassadors of the European Union held a meeting with President Michel Sleiman, during which they pledged additional support for Lebanon in coping with the burden of Syrian refugees in the country. EU Ambassador Angelina Eghorst said after the talks, an additional amount of 70 million euros will be allocated by the EU humanitarian agency ECHO to help the poorest refugees through the winter. She explained that the contribution will cover all the needs identified and planned for the poorest Syrian refugees during the winter under the winterization program developed by the Interagency Coordination in Lebanon. The assistance will last from November of this year to March of next year, and it will be dedicated to 90,000 families living at an altitude above 500 meters above sea level or in the informal tented settlements, and 10% of vulnerable Syrian families living below 500 meters. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is calling on Lebanese leaders to fortify the national institutions and safeguard the country from the repercussions of the Syrian turmoil, expressing concern over Hezbollah's involvement in battles in the neighboring country. According to a Nahar newspaper published today, the UN chief praised the endeavors carried out by President Michel Sleiman to maintain the dissociation policy, calling on all parties to abide by the Babda Declaration. The Babda Declaration was unanimously adopted during a national dialogue session in June of 2012. It calls for Lebanon to disassociate itself from regional crises, most notably the one in Syria. Ban slammed the Lebanese officials' failure to form a new cabinet capable of confronting the lingering crises. Ban said in his report the government must be formed without any further delay. State Commissioner to the Military Court, Judge Sa'ed, has charged Palestinians, 18 of them, only one of them in custody so far, for planning terrorist activities. This is according to the state-run national news agency. The NNA said that among those who received the charges were Wissam Ahmed Naim, who was recently arrested for forging identification documents for suspected terrorists, and Tawfiq Tah from the Islamist Al-Nusra Front. The charges include the formation of an armed gang for the purpose of carrying out terrorist activities. If convicted, the suspects faced the death penalty. The General Security Department announced on Monday that Naim was arrested for forging IDs in addition to designing and manufacturing electronic devices used in bomb timers. It accused him of firing rockets, taking part in activities that violate the state's internal and external security, and engaging in sectarian incitement. And General Security Chief Magistral General Abbas Ibrahim discussed with Syrian Security Chief Ali Mamlouk the release of the 9 Lebanese pilgrims who are being held in Syria's Azaz region. According to Safir newspaper, Mamlouk, who is charged by Lebanese judicial authorities along with former Information Minister Michel Smeha with forming a group to commit terrorist crimes in Lebanon, informed Ibrahim in a telephone conversation that the Syrian authorities will cooperate with any solution that guarantees the release of the men. Mamlouk and Smeha were also charged with plotting to assassinate political and religious figures. Safir said that Mamlouk and Ibrahim agreed to hold a meeting in the upcoming few hours. He pointed out that the Lebanese state the 9 pilgrims should be released in one batch. However, the abductors insist on releasing the men at different intervals. They have demanded the release of 282 women detainees from Syrian prisons in return for these 9 men. A high-level Syrian general has been killed during a battle with rebels in the eastern province of Deir ez-Zor, according to state media. Major General Jamah Shmah was head of military intelligence in the province, where the regime has been battling armed opposition fighters seeking to overthrow President Bashar al-Assad. State media gave no immediate details on when, where in the province Jamah was killed or how, but Rebels Forum said he died during clashes with fighters in the city of Deir ez-Zor. Rami Abdurrahman, the director of the UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, said initial reports suggested Jamah had been shot by a sniper in the city's Rashidiyya district, but there was no confirmation. The group also reported fierce fighting between regime troops and rebels in several parts of the province, including the city, which is the largest in the eastern Syria province. Jamah was one of Syria's senior security officers in Lebanon during Syria's military deployment in the country between 1976 and 2005. Cyprus says that it has approved the establishment of a support base on the Mediterranean island for chemical weapons inspectors deployed in war-hit Syria. The Council of Ministers has ratified the agreement between the Republic of Cyprus and the UN OPCW, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, for the establishment of a support base of the joint mission of UN OPCW. Cyprus says it would facilitate the safe presence and conduct of the activities of the joint mission. The support base has been created within the UN-controlled buffer zone and Nicosia's disused airport, from where inspectors will travel to and from Syria about 220 kilometers away. That's loud. A young Chinese couple sells their daughter next, and they use the proceeds to buy an Apple iPhone. Stay with us. Welcome back. More Israelis are supporting Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's stance on the Iran nuclear issue after the Islamic Republic met world powers in Geneva this week. An opinion poll showed that some 58% of the respondents to the question, how would you rate Netanyahu's recent performance in the global arena vis-a-vis Iran, said it was or very good, according to the poll published in Haaretz newspaper. Netanyahu and his government expressed bitter skepticism over nuclear talks in Geneva between Iran and the P5+1 countries, the United States, Britain, France, China and Russia, plus Germany, warning his Western allies they risked being duped into easy sanctions prematurely. The Prime Minister said Israel reserved the right to carry out a unilateral military strike to prevent Iran obtaining nuclear weapons capability. The P5+1 and Israel, Iran's arch-foe, fear that Tehran's atomic program is a disguised effort to develop nuclear weapons capability, a claim it denies vehemently. A suicide car bomber killed 12 soldiers and wounded 6 others on Friday in an attack on a military command center in southern Yemen's Abyan province. Security and military sources say the attack in the district of Ahwar targeted the command center of the 111th Brigade. The security source also said that the commander of the brigade was seriously wounded. The sources gave an initial toll of 6 dead, but said later that it had doubled to 12. The commander was still among the 6 wounded. The military source said the bomber had used an armored vehicle to carry out the attack. On Thursday, gunmen suspected of membership in Al-Qaeda carried out 2 attacks targeting a police post and a security checkpoint near Abyan, according to military sources. Just to remind you, suspected Al-Qaeda fighters carry out frequent attacks in southern Yemen, a lawless region where jihadist groups are very active. Saudi Arabia is rejecting membership of the UN Security Council a day after it was elected to the body, accusing it of double standards in resolving world conflicts. The Foreign Ministry said work mechanisms and double standards on the Security Council prevent it from carrying out its duties and assuming its responsibilities in keeping world peace. For the first time ever, oil-rich conservative Saudi Arabia won a seat on Thursday on the 15-member council, which has a key role in dealing with world conflicts. But Saudi UN Ambassador Abdullah Al-Muallimi said that reflected Riyadh's long-standing policy in support of moderation and in support of resolving disputes in peaceful means. But the Foreign Ministry said Saudi Arabia declines to be a member of a body unable to tackle long-standing conflicts in the Middle East or rid the region of the threat of nuclear war. Greece's Coast Guard has arrested 78 migrants believed to be Syrians on the eastern island of Rhodes in the Aegean Sea. According to port authorities, had been searching for these migrants on the island since Wednesday following the arrest of 2 men presumed to be smugglers sailing in a boat under a Turkish flag close to Rhodes. The Coast Guard has not released the undocumented migrants' nationalities, but local media reports they are Syrian. On Tuesday, Greece's Coast Guard rescued 73 Syrian refugees stranded on a yacht in the Ionian Sea in the west of the country, who were then transferred to the southern port city of Kalamata. Greece is the main port of entry into the European Union for migrants and refugees fleeing war-torn and impoverished countries in Africa, the Middle East, and the Indian subcontinent. And we move on to Australia, where authorities are assessing damage from almost 100 wildfires burning across the most populous state that have killed 1 man, destroyed homes, and forced hundreds to evacuate. Milder conditions in New South Wales were helping firefighters after Thursday's unseasonably hot temperatures and strong winds had compounded the conditions and threatened towns surrounding the state capital, Sydney. Natalie Sanders, the rural fire service department woman, said the number of fires had dropped from more than 100 to 94, burning across over 500 square kilometers. But she said 28 other fires were made out of control. Assessment teams and police were moving into the destruction zone in search of survivors and victims. And officials are also trying to determine how many homes were destroyed. Hundreds of residents spent Thursday night in dozens of evacuation centers in the Blue Mountains and elsewhere in New South Wales. A young Chinese couple are facing criminal punishment for selling their infant daughter and using the proceeds to buy an Apple iPhone. According to state media, Shanghai prosecutors have brought a case against them for human trafficking after they illegally put their 3rd child up for adoption online and accepted money for the baby. It said investigators found the mother, whose full name was not given, used the money to buy an iPhone, high-end sports shoes, and other goods. Apple's products are wildly popular in China, where a teenager sold his kidney and used the funds to buy an iPhone and an iPad in an incident widely reported last year. But the couple told police that they wanted the girl to have a better upbringing than they could afford, since they already have 2 children. Some Chinese, especially in rural areas, have a traditional preference for sons, though reports did not say if the child's gender was also a factor in this case. An Oklahoma family is terrifying its neighbors with home Halloween decorations depicting 2 eerily realistic accident victims. The gory tableau at the Mullins family home in Mustang, Oklahoma, includes a man who appears to have been run over by a truck and another whose head has been squashed under a garage door, complete with fake blood splatter. The scene has drawn gawkers and some concern. At least 1 woman called 911 to report the crushed head. Emergency personnel responded and discovered a dummy. His wife, Jennifer Mullins, says she was inspired by the social media website Pinterest. She also says that Halloween has always been a favorite holiday for her family and that they knew the display would raise eyebrows, but perhaps not win them quite so much attention. Well, that marks the end of our bulletin for today. Let me remind you of our headlines. Lebanese Forces leader Samir Jaja says that Lebanon has been suffering from a crisis in its political system over the rejection of a certain party of the Ta'if Accord. United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon calls Lebanese leaders to fortify the national institutions and safeguard the country from the repercussions of the Syrian turmoil. The ambassador of the EU held a meeting with President Michel Sleiman, during which they pledged additional support to Lebanon in coping with the burden of Syrian refugees in the country. Those are your Friday headlines live on Future Television in Beirut. I'm Yumna Naufal, wishing you a nice and safe weekend.